Picture this: September 2000, Jerusalem's Temple Mount. Ariel Sharon's footsteps spark the Second Intifada. Stones fly, bombs shatter streets, and Israeli tanks crush cities, burying Oslo's peace in blood. 5 years, 4,000 lives lost, a wall rises, and Arafat's death shifts the tide. Yet Israel's Gaza withdrawal brings fleeting hope. Welcome to Chapter 8 of the Deep Chapter, where peace dreams clash with brutal reality. Join us to uncover the truth. Let's dive in.
The spark of the Second Intifada, 2002-001. The Camp David Summit. A fragile hope crumbles. July 2000 stands as a pivotal moment in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Oslo Accords, signed in 1993, promised a path to peace framework for a two-state solution. With negotiations to resolve core issues, the borders of a future Palestinian state, the right of return for Palestinian refugees, Israeli settlements in the West Bank and Gaza, and the status of Jerusalem, a city sacred to Jews, Muslims, and Christians. By 2000, however, the Oslo process is faltering. Israeli settlements have grown, with over 200,000 settlers living in the West Bank, according to B'Tselem, straining Palestinian hopes for statehood. Sporadic violence, including clashes at checkpoints and protests over land confiscation, has eroded trust. The Palestinian Authority, led by Yasser Arafat, struggles to maintain authority, while Israeli politics fracture under competing visions of peace and security. The Camp David Summit, held from July 11th to July 25th, 2000, is a desperate attempt to salvage Oslo's vision. U.S. President Bill Clinton hosts the talks at the presidential retreat in Maryland, aiming to broker a final peace agreement before his term ends. Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, a former military general, leads a fragile coalition government facing pressure to deliver security and preserve Israel's interests. Yasser Arafat, chairman of the Palestinian Authority, represents a population exhausted by decades of occupation, economic hardship, and unfulfilled promises of statehood. The stakes are immense. A deal could reshape the Middle East. Failure could unravel years of progress. The negotiations are grueling, with sleepless nights and intense debates over maps and proposals. According to Clinton's memoirs, My Life, 3 core issues dominate: the borders of a Palestinian state, the right of return for millions of Palestinian refugees displaced. Since Israel's founding in 1948 and control over Jerusalem, Barak offers unprecedented concessions for an Israeli leader. A Palestinian state covering approximately 91% of the West Bank and all of Gaza, with land swaps to compensate for annexed settlements and shared control over parts of East Jerusalem, including some Palestinian neighborhoods. Dennis Ross, a U.S. negotiator, writes in The Missing Piece that this proposal went further than any previous Israeli offer, marking a bold step toward compromise. For Palestinians, however, the offer is inadequate. Arafat demands full sovereignty over East Jerusalem, particularly the Temple Mount, known to Muslims as Haram al-Sharif, home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, Islam's third holiest site. The right of return remains a non-negotiable demand. Rooted in the displacement of over 700,000 Palestinians during the 1948 Nakba, or catastrophe, as documented by historian Elon, Palestinian negotiator Seb Yeriket argues the proposal fragments the West Bank with Israeli-controlled corridors and leaves too many settlements intact, undermining the viability of a state. Arafat, wary of being seen as betraying sacred principles, rejects the deal, fearing backlash from his people in the broader Arab world. On July 25, 2000, the summit collapses without an agreement. Clinton publicly blames Arafat, stating in a press conference that the Palestinian leader missed a historic opportunity. Israeli public opinion turns against Barak, who risked political capital for peace. Many Israelis feel betrayed, believing the offer was generous. Polls by the Israel Democracy Institute in 2000 show declining support for negotiations. Palestinians, meanwhile, view the summit as proof of Israel's unwillingness to offer true sovereignty. According to a 2000 Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey research poll, 68% of Palestinians felt the talks failed to address their core demands. The failure deepens mistrust. Israelis doubt, Palestinians want peace. Palestinians believe Israel seeks control under the guise of compromise. The collapse sends shockwaves through the region. The West Bank and Gaza, frustration boils over. Decades of military occupation, checkpoints, curfews, and land confiscations have choked Palestinian life. By 2000, over 400,000 settlers live in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. For peace now, often on land confiscated from Palestinian villages. In Gaza, 1.2 million people live in a 140 square mile strip, 40% below the poverty line, according to UN data. The Oslo process, meant to deliver statehood by 1999, feels like a broken promise. In Israel, fear of violence grows, and hardline voices gain traction. Barak's coalition weakens, paving the way for a shift in leadership. The Oslo dream, already fragile, is on the brink of collapse. Ariel Sharon's Temple Mount visit. The match that ignites the fire on September 28, 2000. A single event ignites the simmering tensions. Ariel Sharon, leader of Israel's right-wing Likud party, visits the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. For Jews, this site is the holiest, believed to be the location of the ancient First and Second Temples, central to Jewish history and faith. For Muslims, it is Haram al-Sharif, the sacred precinct housing the Al-Aqsa Mosque in the Dome of the Rock, revered as Islam's third holiest site. Sharon's visit, accompanied by over 1,000 Israeli police and security forces, is widely seen by Palestinians as a deliberate provocation, asserting Israeli sovereignty over a contested holy site. Sharon is a deeply polarizing figure. His role in the 1982 Lebanon War, particularly the Sabra and Shatila massacres, where hundreds of Palestinian civilians were killed by Israeli-allied militias under his oversight as defense minister, makes him a reviled symbol of aggression among Palestinians. An Israeli commission in 1983 found him indirectly responsible, barring him from defense roles, yet he remains a powerful political force. His staunch support for settlements, over 400,000 Israelis live in settlements by 2000. Her peace now further cements his image as a hardliner. The visit, framed by Sharon as an assertion of Israeli rights, comes at a moment of raw tension, just 2 months after Camp David's failure. The visit triggers immediate unrest. Palestinian worshippers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque clash with Israeli police shortly after Sharon's departure. Protesters throw stones. Police respond with tear gas, rubber bullets, and in some cases, live ammunition. According to a UN report, 5 Palestinians are killed that day, and dozens are injured, sparking outrage. The next day, September 29th, protests erupt across the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, met with lethal force. Budslam, an Israeli human rights organization, reports 7 more Palestinians killed during clashes on September 29th. Among them is 12-year-old Mohammed al-Dora, killed in Gaza's Netzarim Junction. Footage captured by France 2 shows Mohammed and his father Jamal cowering behind a concrete barrel as bullets fly. The boy's death, though later disputed over who fired the shots, becomes a global symbol of the Intifada's brutality. Mohammed's death requires a moment of reflection. The image of a 12-year-old boy, terrified and clinging to his father, resonates worldwide, galvanizing Palestinian anger. For Palestinians, it embodies Israeli aggression and the vulnerability of their youth under occupation. For Israelis, the escalating protests, stone-throwing, Molotov cocktails, and attacks on soldiers signal a descent into chaos. Both sides point fingers. Palestinian leaders, including Arafat, denounce Sharon's visit as a calculated act to inflame tensions. With Fatah officials calling it a declaration of war, Israeli officials, including Sharon, insist the visit was a routine exercise of rights and claim the Intifada was pre-planned, citing intelligence reports of militant mobilization. Historians like Benny Morris argued the uprising was both spontaneous and rooted in years of grievances, occupation, settlement expansion, and Camp David's failure. The Second Intifada, sparked by this moment, begins to spread like wildfire. The early violence. A cycle of bloodshed begins by late 2000. The Second Intifada is a full-scale uprising, distinct from the First Intifada of 1987 to 1993, which focused on protests and civil disobedience. This time, violence dominates. Palestinian militant groups, including Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and Fatah's Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, adopt suicide bombings targeting Israeli civilians. Beslan reports over 500 Palestinian and 100 Israeli deaths by the end of 2001. The numbers reflect a grim reality. A November 2000 bus bombing in Tel Aviv kills 2 and injures dozens. A Jerusalem market attack leaves families mourning. For Israelis, public spaces, cafes, buses, malls become potential targets. Parents grow anxious, checking news obsessively. Schools hire security guards. A 2001 poll by the Tommy Steinmetz Center shows 70% of Israelis fear for their safety daily. For Palestinians, the Intifada is a response to systemic oppression. The occupations, checkpoints, curfews, and land confiscations have stifled daily life. In the West Bank, over 1,000 checkpoints and roadblocks restrict movement. Per the UN, disrupting access to jobs, schools, and hospitals. In Gaza, 1.2 million people live in a 140 square mile strip, 40% below the poverty line, according to UN data. Hamas gains support by offering social services, schools, clinics, food, aid alongside calls for armed resistance. Young Palestinians, some as young as 15, join protests or militant groups driven by despair, anger, or personal loss. A 2001 Human Rights Watch report notes that many militants are motivated by tragedies, friends or siblings killed in clashes. Yet, the violence traps civilians on both sides. Palestinian families endure raids and restrictions. Israeli families mourn bombing victims. Israeli Defense Forces (IDF) respond with overwhelming force. Raids target militant hideouts in West Bank cities like Ramallah, Nablus, and Hebron. Checkpoints tighten, with long delays humiliating Palestinians, a farmer unable to reach fields, a student missing exams, a mother struggling for medicine. Human Rights Watch reports that the IDF's use of live ammunition against protesters often escalates clashes, leading to civilian deaths. A December 2000 incident in Hebron sees 15 Palestinians killed during protests per Beslan. Palestinian militants, meanwhile, smuggle weapons or build homemade explosives, targeting soldiers and settlers. A 2001 attack on a West Bank checkpoint kills an Israeli soldier, prompting further raids. The cycle is relentless. A protest turns deadly. A bombing triggers a raid. A raid fuels another attack. The international community struggles to respond. The UN Security Council condemns the violence in Resolution 1322, but fails to broker a ceasefire. In December 2000, Clinton proposes the Clinton Parameters dividing Jerusalem, sharing sovereignty over holy sites and addressing refugees, but both sides reject it. Israel's political landscape shifts as Barak loses power in February 2001 to Ariel Sharon, who campaigns on security over compromise. Arafat, under pressure in Ramallah, loses control over militant factions like Hamas, which operate independently. The U.S., preoccupied with the 2000 election and later the September 11th attacks, offers limited mediation. Egypt and Jordan, key Arab mediators, call for de-escalation, but their influence wanes. Protests in Cairo, Amman, and European capitals demand an end to the violence, yet the Intifada grows deadlier. By the end of 2001, the human cost is staggering. Beslan reports over 600 deaths, 500 Palestinians, 100 Israelis. In Gaza, a generation grows up amid tear gas and rubble. In Tel Aviv, families avoid public spaces. Both sides feel betrayed. Palestinians by Oslo's unfulfilled promises, Israelis by the return of violence. The Second Intifada, sparked by a failed summit and a provocative visit, is now a fire-consuming hope. The spark of the Second Intifada camp, David's collapse, Sharon's visit, and the early violence sets the stage for a brutal conflict. Over 600 lives are lost by 2001, and trust between Israelis and Palestinians lies in ruins. The Intifada's deadly spiral 2001-2002, the surge of suicide bombings, a new era of terror. By 2001, the Second Intifada has transformed from protests and clashes into a brutal war of attrition. Unlike the First Intifada of 1987 to 1993, which relied on stone throwing and civil disobedience, this uprising is marked by a chilling new tactic: suicide bombings. Palestinian militant groups, including Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and Fatah's Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, target Israeli civilians in cities like Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Haifa. According to Haaretz, 40 suicide bombings occur between 2001 and 2002, killing over 200 Israelis, men, women, and children in everyday settings like cafes, buses, and shopping malls. These attacks redefine the conflict, bringing terror directly to Israeli urban centers. One of the deadliest strikes hits on June 1, 2001, at the Dolphinarium, a beachfront nightclub in Tel Aviv. A young Hamas bomber detonates explosives amid a crowd of teenagers, many of them Russian immigrants enjoying a weekend night. The attack kills 21 people, mostly young adults, and injures over 100. The loss devastates families, as parents mourning children who had gathered for music and celebration. Another attack on August 9, 2001 targets the Sporo Pizzeria in Jerusalem, killing 15, including 7 children, and wounding 130. The image's shattered storefronts, grieving relatives become a haunting fixture in Israeli media. By 2002, bombings intensify, with a March attack at a Jerusalem cafe, killing 11. For Israelis, public spaces become battlegrounds. A 2001 poll by the Tommy Steinmetz Center shows 70% of Israelis fear leaving their homes. With parents escorting children to school and restaurants hiring armed guards, for Palestinians, suicide bombings are a desperate response to decades of occupation, economic hardship, and the failure of the Oslo Accords. In Gaza, where 1.2 million people live in a 140-square-mile strip, poverty affects over 40% of the population per UN data. The West Bank, fragmented by over 400,000 settlers and 1,000 checkpoints, offers little hope. Hamas, founded during the First Intifada, gained support by blending militancy with social services, schools, clinics, and food aid for impoverished families. Islamic Jihad and the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades linked to Arafat's Fatah also recruit young men, often teenagers, driven by despair or ideology. A 2001 Human Rights Watch report notes that many bombers are motivated by personal loss as siblings or friends killed in clashes or raids. Some are promised martyrdom or financial support for their families. Yet, these attacks deepen the suffering of Palestinian civilians who face the consequences of Israel's response. The bombings trap both sides in fear. In Israel, daily life is reshaped. Mothers hesitate to board buses, students avoid markets, and families mourn at makeshift memorials. In the Palestinian territories, the attacks fuel a sense of resistance but also invite retaliation, leaving civilians vulnerable. The tactic, condemned internationally as terrorism, shifts the Intifada's dynamics, hardening Israeli public opinion against peace talks and empowering hardline leaders. Israel's response: targeted killings and military escalation. Israel, now led by Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, elected in February 2001, responds with unrelenting force. Sharon, a former general known for his role in the 1982 Lebanon War and his support for settlements, campaigns on restoring security. His government authorizes targeted assassinations of Palestinian militants suspected of planning attacks. According to B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights group, around 100 Palestinian militants are killed in these operations between 2001 and 2002, often through airstrikes, helicopter attacks, or special forces raids. One high-profile target is Mustafa Zibri, a leader of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine (PFLP). Killed in August 2001 by a missile strike in Ramallah, the attack, precise in its intent, signals Israel's determination to disrupt militant networks. These operations, however, often come at a steep cost. Civilian casualties are frequent, inflaming tensions. In July 2002, an airstrike targeting Hamas leader Salah Shida in Gaza City kills 14 others, including 9 children per B'Tselem. The strike, conducted in a densely populated neighborhood, draws global condemnation, with the UN and Human Rights Watch criticizing the disproportionate use of force. Israel defends the operation, arguing Shida was responsible for deadly attacks. But the civilian deaths fuel Palestinian rage and recruitment for militant groups. Other strikes, like the January 2002 killing of Reed Karmi, a Fatah militant in Tulkarm, spark retaliatory bombings, perpetuating the cycle. According to a 2002 Amnesty International report, at least 20 civilians are killed in targeted operations during this period, raising ethical questions about the tactic's effectiveness. Sharon's government also tightens control over the Palestinian territories. Checkpoints multiply across the West Bank, restricting movement to a crawl. By 2002, over 1,200 roadblocks and checkpoints are in place, per the UN, disrupting access to jobs, schools, and hospitals. Curfews lock down cities like Nablus, Jenin, and Hebron, sometimes for days, forcing families to ration food and water. The Palestinian economy, already fragile, collapses further. Unemployment in Gaza soars to 50%. And 60% of Palestinians live below the poverty line, according to UN estimates. For ordinary Palestinians, daily life becomes a gauntlet of humiliation and survival. A farmer cannot reach his fields. A student misses exams. A mother struggles to find medicine for her child. The occupation, already oppressive, becomes suffocating. Operation Defensive Shield. The West Bank reoccupied. The violence reaches a breaking point in March 2002. When a suicide bombing at a Passover Seder in Netanya's Park Hotel kills 30 Israelis, including elderly survivors of the Holocaust, and injures 140. The attack, claimed by Hamas, is one of the deadliest of the Intifada. Israel and prompting Sharon to act decisively. On March 29, 2002, Israel launches Operation Defensive Shield, the largest military operation in the West Bank since the 1967 Six-Day War. The goal is to dismantle militant networks and restore security. Israeli forces reoccupy major Palestinian cities: Ramallah, Jenin, Nablus, Bethlehem, and Tulkarm, deploying tanks, helicopters, and thousands of troops. According to B'Tselem, the operation results in 500 Palestinian deaths, including combatants and civilians, and thousands of arrests. The Battle of Jenin, centered on the city's refugee camp, becomes a focal point of controversy. Israeli forces, facing heavy resistance from militants, engage in intense urban combat. Bulldozers demolish homes, and airstrikes target suspected hideouts. Human Rights Watch reports 52 Palestinians killed in Jenin, including 22 civilians, with allegations of excessive force and indiscriminate destruction. Israel denies targeting civilians, claiming the camp was a militant stronghold. But the devastation in entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble sparks outrage. The UN later investigates and finds no evidence of a large-scale massacre, as some Palestinian reports claimed, but the civilian toll draws international condemnation. In Nablus, Israeli forces raid the old city, damaging historic sites and arresting hundreds. In Bethlehem, the siege of the Church of the Nativity, where 200 Palestinians, including militants, take refuge, lasts 39 days, ending with a negotiated exile of 13 militants to Europe. The operation cripples the Palestinian Authority's infrastructure, destroying government buildings, police stations, and records in Ramallah. For Palestinians, Defensive Shield is a collective punishment, undermining their autonomy and deepening despair. For Israel, it's a necessary response to stop the bombings, with military officials claiming it disrupts dozens of planned attacks. Yet the operation fuels further resistance, ensuring the Intifada's continuation. Arafat's isolation, a leader under siege. Amid the escalating violence, Yasser Arafat, the face of the Palestinian cause, becomes a central target. Israel accuses him of failing to stop militant attacks, with Sharon and other officials claiming he tacitly supports groups like the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades. In March 2002, during Operation Defensive Shield, Israeli forces besiege Arafat's Ramallah compound, the Muqata. Tanks and bulldozers encircle the complex, cutting off electricity, water, and communications. According to UN reports, Arafat is confined for months, meeting aides in darkened rooms and issuing statements by candlelight. The siege humiliates the Palestinian Authority, portraying it as powerless against Israel's might. For Palestinians, the siege is an attack on their national identity. Arafat, a symbol of resistance since the 1960s, gains renewed support despite his declining authority. By 2002, militant groups like Hamas and Islamic Jihad operate independently, ignoring his calls for restraint. The Palestinian Authority, established under Oslo, is crumbling, its police forces outgunned, its economy in tatters. For Israel, isolating Arafat is strategic, aiming to weaken the PA and force compliance. Sharon refuses to negotiate with Arafat, calling him irrelevant in a 2002 speech. Yet the siege backfires, rallying Palestinian support for Arafat and fueling accusations of collective punishment. The U.S., while backing Israel's right to self-defense, pressures Sharon to ease the siege, wary of destabilizing the region further. Egypt and Jordan condemn the move, but their mediation efforts stall. The human cost and global outrage. By the end of 2002, the Second Intifada's toll is devastating. B'Tselem reports over 1,000 Palestinian and 300 Israeli deaths since 2000, with thousands more injured. Entire communities are traumatized. In Israel, fear of bombings reshapes daily life. Parents accompany children to school, restaurants install metal detectors, and families mourn at frequent funerals. In the West Bank and Gaza, curfews, raids, and economic collapse leave families destitute. The UN estimates 60% of Palestinians live below the poverty line by 2002. With Gaza's unemployment reaching 50%, children grow up amid checkpoints and gunfire. Hospitals are overwhelmed with casualties. The international community is divided and largely ineffective. The U.S. supports Israel's security measures but urges restraint, with President George W. Bush calling for a Palestinian state in June 2002, a vision later formalized in the Roadmap for Peace. Arab nations, including Egypt and Saudi Arabia, condemn Israel's actions, proposing peace initiatives like the Arab Peace Initiative, which offers normalized relations for a full withdrawal to 1967 borders. European governments push for renewed negotiations, but the violence drowns out diplomacy. Protests erupt globally from Cairo to London, demanding an end to the bloodshed. The UN General Assembly passes resolutions condemning both the bombings and Israel's military response, but no binding action follows. The cycle continues. A bombing prompts a raid fuels another bombing. The years 2001 and 2002 mark the Second Intifada's darkest phase. Suicide bombings, targeted killings, Operation Defensive Shield, and Arafat's siege lock Israelis and Palestinians in a relentless cycle of violence. Over 1,300 lives are lost, and trust is obliterated. In the next episode, the faint glimmers of hope emerge: the roadmap for peace, the Gaza disengagement, the challenges that follow, including Arafat's death and Hamas's rise, the roadmap and barriers to 002 to 003, the roadmap for peace, a fragile hope amid skepticism. By late 2002, the Second Intifada has claimed over 1,300 lives, 1,000 Palestinians and 300 Israelis. According to B'Tselem, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict seems locked in a cycle of violence. Suicide bombings by Palestinian militants and Israeli military raids dominate daily life, eroding faith in peace. The international community, desperate to break the stalemate, turns to diplomacy. In June 2002, U.S. President George W. Bush outlines a vision for peace. It's calling for a Palestinian state alongside Israel, a significant shift in U.S. policy. This vision evolves into the Roadmap for Peace, formally launched on April 30, 2003. Under the auspices of the Quartet, the United States, European Union, United Nations, and Russia. The roadmap, detailed in U.S. State Department records, proposes a three-phase plan to achieve a Palestinian state by 2005. Phase 1 demands an immediate end to violence, with Palestinians cracking down on militant groups like Hamas and Islamic Jihad, and Israel halting settlement expansion. Phase 2 envisions a provisional Palestinian state with temporary borders, while Phase 3 aims for a final agreement resolving core issues: borders, refugees, settlements, and Jerusalem. The plan emphasizes mutual steps: Palestinian reforms to build transparent institutions and Israeli withdrawal from reoccupied West Bank cities. It's an ambitious blueprint, backed by international consensus, with Bush promising to ride herd on both sides, as he states in a 2003 speech. Yet, skepticism abounds. For Palestinians, the roadmap's demands feel one-sided. The Palestinian Authority, weakened by Israel's Operation Defensive Shield, lacks the capacity to control militant factions. Arafat, still confined in his Ramallah compound, faces declining authority, as Hamas gains support in Gaza. A 2003 poll by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research shows 52% of Palestinians doubt the roadmap's viability. citing Israel's continued settlement activity. Over 430,000 settlers live in the West Bank and East Jerusalem by 2003, per Peace Now. The requirement to dismantle militant groups is seen as unrealistic without Israeli concessions, such as lifting curfews and checkpoints that strangle Palestinian life. Israelis, too, are wary. After 2 years of suicide bombings, public trust in peace talks is at an all-time low. A 2003 Israel Democracy Institute poll reveals 65% of Israelis support security measures over negotiations. Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, a hardliner elected on a platform of strength, conditionally accepts the roadmap, but insists on Palestinian action against terrorism first. Israel demands 14 reservations, including rejecting the right of return for Palestinian refugees and maintaining control over security zones. Sharon's government continues military operations, undermining the plan's call for de-escalation. By mid-2003, settlement construction accelerates, with 2,000 new housing units approved per Boatsline, contradicting the roadmap's freeze. The roadmap's launch coincides with a fragile ceasefire, or Hudna, declared by Hamas and Fatah in June 2003, brokered by Egypt. The ceasefire reduces attacks briefly, with Palestinian Authority Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas appointed in March 2003 to share power with Arafat, pushing for reforms. Israel eases some checkpoints and releases 100 Palestinian prisoners, per UN reports, but the gestures are limited. By August 2003, the ceasefire collapses when a Hamas suicide bombing in Jerusalem kills 23, prompting Israeli airstrikes. Both sides blame each other for violating the roadmap's terms, and the plan stalls. The quartet's inability to enforce compliance-lacking mechanisms to penalize violations leaves the initiative toothless. The hope of 2005 fades as violence resurges. The West Bank barrier, a physical and psychological divide amid the diplomatic stalemate. Israel takes a unilateral step that reshapes the conflict's landscape, the construction of the West Bank barrier. In June 2002, Sharon's government approves the project, citing the need to stop suicide bombers infiltrating from the West Bank. By 2003, construction is underway. With concrete walls, barbed wire, and watchtowers stretching across the territory, the barrier, officially called the security fence by Israel and the apartheid wall by Palestinians, is planned to span 700 kilometers, though only 200 kilometers are completed by 2003 per Boatsline. The barrier's route is contentious. Rather than following the 1967 Green Line, the pre-occupation boundary, it cuts deep into the West Bank, seizing 10,000 acres of Palestinian land, according to Boatsline. The route encircles settlements, securing over 80% of settlers, while isolating 200,000 Palestinians. Per UNRWA, villages like Kalkulia are nearly encircled, with farmers cut off from their fields. In Jais, 75% of farmland is separated from the village, forcing residents to pass through guarded gates, often closed arbitrarily. The UN reports that 11,000 Palestinians in 38 communities are trapped in closed areas between the barrier and the Green Line, requiring permits to access their own homes. The economic impact is severe. Olive groves, a lifeline for many families, are uprooted and trade is disrupted. For Israel, the barrier is a security necessity. By 2003, suicide bombings have killed over 350 Israelis since 2000, per Haaretz. The barrier, Israeli officials argue, reduces infiltrations, with a 30% drop in attacks by late 2003, according to the Israeli Ministry of Defense. For Palestinians, it's a land grab, entrenching occupation and fragmenting their territory. The International Court of Justice, in a 2004 advisory opinion, declares the barrier's route illegal under international law, citing its impact on Palestinian rights. Israel rejects the ruling, prioritizing security. The barrier becomes a physical and psychological divide, symbolizing the conflict's intractability. Palestinians see it as a wall of separation. Israelis view it as a shield against terror. Both sides grow further apart, physically and emotionally. Ongoing violence, a relentless cycle. While diplomacy falters and the barrier rises, violence remains unrelenting. In 2003, 30 suicide bombings kill 150 Israelis, per Haaretz, targeting buses, markets, and cafes. A double bombing in Tel Aviv in January 2003 kills 23, while a Haifa bus attack in March kills 17, including school children. These attacks, claimed by Hamas and Islamic Jihad, deepen Israeli trauma. Families mourn at frequent funerals, and public spaces, once vibrant, are deserted. A 2003 poll by the Tommy Steinmetz Center shows 80% of Israelis support harsher military measures, reflecting a hardened public mood. Israel's response is equally intense. IDF operations kill 600 Palestinians in 2003, per Haaretz, including militants and civilians. Targeted assassinations continue, with 50 militants killed, per Batson. A September 2003 airstrike targets Hamas leader Ahmad Yassin in Gaza, wounding but not killing him. Civilian casualties. Mount Bitslam reports 200 non-combatants killed in raids and airstrikes. In Raif Gaza, home demolitions displaced thousands, with the UN estimating 1,500 homes destroyed by 2003. The operations aim to disrupt militant networks, but often escalate the cycle, as each raid fuels anger and recruitment. The Palestinian Authority struggles to maintain control. Arafat, still under siege in Ramallah, is sidelined by Israel and the US, who demand reforms. Mahmoud Abbas, appointed prime minister in March 2003, attempts to rein in militants but lacks authority. Hamas and Islamic Jihad, emboldened by grassroots support, operate independently. In Gaza, where poverty affects 60% of the population per UNRWA, Hamas's social services, schools, hospitals, food aid bolster its influence. A 2003 poll by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research shows 30% of Palestinians support Hamas, up from 20% in 2000, reflecting disillusionment with the PA. The human toll is staggering. By 2003, Bitslam reports 1,600 Palestinian and 450 Israeli deaths since 2000. In the West Bank, curfews and checkpoints disrupt daily life. A student in Nablus misses school. Farmer in Jenin loses crops. A mother in Ramallah queues for hours at a checkpoint. In Israel, fear of bombings reshapes routines. Parents avoid malls. Cafes install security guards. The psychological scars deepen, with children on both sides growing up amid violence. The UN estimates 700,000 Palestinians, half the population, are food insecure by 2003. While Israeli communities near Gaza face rocket attacks, a new tactic emerging late in the year: global response and growing despair. The international community struggles to respond. The US, focused on the Iraq War launched in March 2003, prioritizes Israel's security, but pushes the roadmap as a diplomatic lifeline. Bush's June 2002 speech, calling for a Palestinian state, raises hopes. But US inaction, failing to pressure Israel on settlements or Palestinians on militancy, undermines progress. The Arab League's 2002 peace initiative, offering normalized relations for a full Israeli withdrawal, gains little traction. European nations, led by France and Germany, call for renewed talks, but their influence is limited. The UN General Assembly passes resolutions condemning both the bombings in Israel's barrier, but no binding measures emerge. Protests erupt globally, from Amman to Paris, demanding an end to the violence. In Cairo, thousands rally for Palestinian rights. In London, demonstrators protest Israel's actions. Yet the conflict remains intractable. The roadmap, launched with fanfare, becomes a symbol of failed diplomacy, with both sides accusing the other of non-compliance. Israel points to ongoing bombings. Palestinians cite settlements and the barrier. The quartet, meant to oversee the plan, lacks enforcement power, and mutual distrust buries hope. The years 2002 and 2003 deepen the Second Intifada's wounds. The roadmap for peace offers a fleeting vision of a Palestinian state, but skepticism and violence prevail. The West Bank barrier, carving through Palestinian land, becomes a physical manifestation of separation. While 30 suicide bombings and IDF operations claim 750 lives, the human toll: 1,600 Palestinians and 450 Israelis dead. Since 2000 reflects a conflict spiraling out of control. In the next episode, the focus shifts to the Gaza disengagement, Arafat's death, and Hamas's rise. Arafat's death and shifting tides. 2004. Yasser Arafat's death, the symbol falls. By 2004, the Second Intifada has claimed over 2,000 Palestinian and 600 Israeli lives, according to Butslem, leaving both sides weary yet entrenched. The Palestinian Authority, battered by Israel's military operations and internal divisions, struggles to maintain authority. At the center of this storm is Yasser Arafat, the iconic leader of the Palestine Liberation Organization PLO, and chairman of the Palestinian Authority. For decades, Arafat has been the face of Palestinian resistance, a symbol of the struggle for statehood since the 1960s. His keffiyeh and olive green uniform are recognized worldwide, embodying both hope and controversy. Yet by 2004, his leadership is faltering. Confined to his Ramallah compound, the Muqada, since Israel's siege during Operation Defensive Shield in 2002, Arafat is isolated, accused by Israel and the U.S. of failing to curb militant violence. In October 2004, Arafat's health deteriorates rapidly. Suffering from severe illness, possibly a stomach infection or flu-like symptoms, he is airlifted to a military hospital in Paris on October 29th, per French medical records. Speculation swirls. Some Palestinians suspect poisoning, though no evidence emerges. And French doctors cite a blood disorder and organ failure. On November 11, 2004, Arafat dies at age 75, leaving a void in Palestinian leadership. His death sparks widespread mourning across the West Bank and Gaza, where tens of thousands gather in Ramallah for his funeral. Crowds chant his name, draping Palestinian flags over his coffin. For many Palestinians, Arafat is a hero who brought their cause to the global stage, securing recognition of the PLO and negotiating the Oslo Accords. A 2004 poll by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey, research shows 70% of Palestinians view him as the father of their national movement. Yet, Arafat's legacy is complex. Critics, including some Palestinians, blame him for mismanaging the Palestinian Authority, tolerating corruption, and failing to unify factions. His refusal to accept the Camp David deal in 2000, an inability to stop suicide bombings, alienated Israel and the U.S., with President George W. Bush declaring him irrelevant in 2002. In Israel, Arafat is seen as a terrorist, responsible for attacks dating back to the 1970s and the Second Intifada's violence. His death, however, raises uncertainty for both sides. Palestinians fear a leadership vacuum will deepen chaos. Israelis wonder if a new leader might shift the conflict's trajectory. The international community, including the UN and Arab states, calls for calm. But Arafat's passing marks a turning point, closing a chapter dominated by his singular presence. Mahmoud Abbas's rise, a pledge for peace. With Arafat gone, the Palestinian Authority faces a critical transition. Mahmoud Abbas, a longtime PLO figure and Arafat's deputy, emerges as the interim leader. Known as Abu Mazen, Abbas is a stark contrast to Arafat. A bespectacled diplomat with a background in negotiations, he co-founded Fatah and helped broker the Oslo Accords. Unlike Arafat's charismatic militancy, Abbas favors pragmatism, advocating dialogue over violence. On January 9, 2005, he is elected Palestinian Authority president with 62% of the vote. Per Palestinian election records, a relatively smooth election monitored by international observers, including the Carter Center, Abbas pledges to revive the peace process and reform the Palestinian Authority. In his inaugural address, he condemns violence, calling for a return to negotiations and an end to the armed chaos of militant factions. He commits to implementing the roadmap for peace. The 2003 Quartet Plan for a Palestinian State by 2005, emphasizing institution building and security reforms. His election raises cautious optimism. The US and EU welcome Abbas as a partner. With Bush inviting him to the White House in May 2005, a gesture denied to Arafat. Israel, under Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, expresses willingness to engage, with Sharon calling Abbas a different kind of leader in a 2005 interview. Yet Abbas faces daunting challenges. The Palestinian Authority is weakened, its infrastructure devastated by Israel's operations. Corruption allegations rampant under Arafat erode public trust. A 2004 Transparency International report ranks the PA among the most corrupt administrations. Abbas promises reforms, appointing technocrats and restructuring security forces, but progress is slow. More critically, he lacks Arafat's charisma and struggles to unify Palestinian factions. Hamas, now a major force in Gaza, boycotts the 2005 election and rejects Abbas's call for nonviolence. A 2004 poll by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research shows 35% of Palestinians support Hamas. It's up from 20% in 2000, reflecting frustration with the PAS failures and admiration for Hamas's social services and resistance. Israel's actions further complicate Abbas's efforts. Despite his outreach, settlement expansion continues, with 3,000 new housing units approved in the West Bank in 2004. Per Peace Now, the West Bank barrier, now 250 kilometers long, isolates 220,000 Palestinians per UNRWA, undermining Abbas's credibility as a negotiator. Israeli military operations persist, with targeted killings and raids disrupting Palestinian cities. Abbas secures a temporary ceasefire in February 2005, negotiated with Sharon at a summit in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, but it frays as violence resumes. The roadmap, already stalled, remains a distant goal, with both sides blaming each other for non-compliance. Hamas's growing influence, a challenge to authority. As Abbas struggles to consolidate power, Hamas emerges as a formidable rival. Founded in 1987 during the First Intifada, Hamas combines militant resistance with extensive social welfare programs, schools, hospitals, and charities that win loyalty in Gaza's impoverished communities. By 2004, Gaza's poverty rate reaches 60% per UNRWA, and Hamas's aid fills gaps left by the PAA's faltering governance. Its military wing, the Eaz ad-Din al-Qassam Brigades, continues attacks, rejecting Abbas' ceasefire efforts. Hamas's charter, calling for Israel's destruction, contrasts sharply with Abbas's diplomacy, appealing to Palestinians disillusioned by years of failed negotiations. Hamas's influence grows through its defiance of Israel and the PA. In 2004, Israel escalates targeted assassinations, killing 2 key Hamas leaders. Sheikh Ahmad Yassin, the group's spiritual leader, in March, and Abdelaziz al-Rantisi, his successor, in April. Both strikes, conducted by airstrikes in Gaza, kill civilians, 14 in Yassin's case. Per Botslam drawing, UN condemnation. Rather than weakening Hamas, the killings martyr its leaders, boosting recruitment. A 2004 rally in Gaza draws 200,000 mourners for Yassin, signaling Hamas's grassroots strength. The group's rocket attacks on Israeli towns, a new tactic, intensify. With 400 rockets fired in 2004, per the Israeli Ministry of Defense, though most cause minimal damage, Hamas's rise reflects deeper Palestinian factionalism. The PA, led by Fatah, is seen as corrupt and ineffective, while Hamas projects discipline and resistance. Internal clashes erupt, with Fatah gunmen attacking Hamas rallies in Gaza, killing 10 in 2004, per Human Rights Watch. Abbas attempts to integrate Hamas into the political process, offering dialogue, but Hamas demands power sharing and rejects disarmament. The divide weakens Palestinian unity, complicating Abbas's efforts to negotiate with Israel and implement the roadmap. For Israel, Hamas's ascendancy justifies continued military pressure. With Sharon dismissing Abbas as too weak to control militants, continued violence, a persistent toll. Despite diplomatic efforts, violence defines 2004. According to Botslam, 20 suicide bombings kill 100 Israelis, a decline from 2003's 30 attacks, but still devastating. A twin bombing in Beersheba in August 2004 kills 16, while an attack at a Jerusalem bus stop claims 7. These strikes, claimed by Hamas and Islamic Jihad, deepen Israeli trauma, with families avoiding public spaces and communities near Gaza facing rocket fire. A 2004 poll by the Israel Democracy Institute shows 75% of Israelis support stronger security measures, reflecting a hardened public mood. Israel's response remains forceful. IDF operations kill 400 Palestinians in 2004 per Botslam, including 150 civilians. Raids in Gaza's Raif and Khan Yunis demolish 1,200 homes, displacing 10,000 people per UNRWA. Targeted killings continue, with 30 militants killed. but civilian casualties such as 8 children in a September Gaza strike draw international criticism. The West Bank barrier, now a towering presence, exacerbates Palestinian hardship, isolating villages and farmland. A 2004 UN report estimates 25,000 Palestinians lose access to their land, crippling rural economies. The violence traps both sides. Israelis live in fear of attacks. Palestinians endure raids, curfews, and economic collapse. The human toll is profound. By 2004, B'Tselem reports 2,400 Palestinian and 700 Israeli deaths since 2000. In Gaza, 70% of the population is food insecure, per UNRWA, with children growing up amid rubble and gunfire. In Israel, communities like Sderot face daily rocket alerts, forcing families into bomb shelters. Psychological scars deepen. Palestinian youth join protests or militias. Israeli parents mourn at memorials. The conflict's asymmetry, high-tech Israeli forces versus Palestinian guerrillas, belies its mutual devastation, with no side spared grief. Global response and stagnation. The international community struggles to respond. The U.S., embroiled in Iraq, supports Abbas, but backs Israel's security measures. Bush's 2004 letter to Sharon endorses Israel's retention of major settlement blocks, angering Palestinians and undermining the roadmap. The EU and UN call for renewed talks, but their influence is limited. The Arab League reiterates its 2002 peace initiative, offering normalized relations for a full Israeli withdrawal, but Israel rejects it. Protests in Cairo, Amman, and European capitals demand peace, but diplomacy stalls. The quartet, overseeing the roadmap, fails to enforce compliance, leaving the plan dormant. Arafat's death in November 2004 offers a chance for change, but the moment slips away. Abbas's election raises hopes, but his weak mandate and Hamas's rise limit progress. Violence, 20 bombings, 400 Palestinian deaths overshadows diplomacy. The West Bank barrier and settlement expansion deepen Palestinian despair, while rocket attacks and bombings fuel Israeli fears. The Second Intifada, now 4 years old, shows no sign of abating. In the next episode, the focus shifts to Israel's Gaza disengagement in 2005 and its consequences. As Hamas consolidates power, Gaza disengagement in a new era. 2005, Israel's Gaza disengagement, a unilateral leap. By 2005, the Second Intifada has claimed over 3,000 lives, 2,400 Palestinians, and 700 Israelis, according to Butts, leaving both sides exhausted yet entrenched. The roadmap for peace, launched in 2003, lies dormant, undermined by mutual distrust and violence. Israel, led by Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, faces a strategic dilemma. Continued occupation of Gaza, home to 1.4 million Palestinians and 8,000 settlers across 21 settlements, is costly and fuels the Intifada. Sharon, a lifelong hawk who champions settlements, shocks the world in 2004 by proposing unilateral disengagement, announced in a speech at the Herzliya conference. The plan calls for Israel to withdraw all settlers and military forces from Gaza and for small West Bank settlements by the end of 2005. The decision, formalized in February 2005 by Israel's Knesset with a 59-40 vote, marks a historic shift. A 140-square-mile strip housing 1.4 million Palestinians, 70% living in poverty, per UNRWA, has been under Israeli occupation since 1967. The 8,000 settlers, living in fortified enclaves like Gush Kataf, control 25% of Gaza's land, per B'Tselem, while Palestinians face overcrowding and economic strangulation. Sharon argues disengagement will enhance Israel's security, reduce friction, and shift the burden of Gaza's governance to the Palestinian Authority. In a 2005 interview, he states, "Gaza cannot be held onto forever. It's better for Israel to act than be acted upon." The move is unilateral, bypassing negotiations with the Palestinian Authority. Now led by Mahmoud Abbas, reflecting Israel's skepticism of diplomacy after the roadmap's failure. The disengagement faces fierce opposition within Israel. Settlers and their supporters, including members of Sharon's Likud party, view it as a betrayal. The settlement movement, rooted in religious and nationalist ideals, sees Gaza as part of Greater Israel. Protests erupt, with 50,000 demonstrators rallying in Jerusalem in May 2005, Perhoritz waving orange ribbons symbolizing opposition. Settler leaders accuse Sharon of abandoning Jewish communities to appease international pressure. A 2005 Israel Democracy Institute poll shows 40% of Israelis oppose the plan, citing fears of increased Palestinian militancy. Hardline rabbis issue religious edicts against evacuation, and some settlers vow resistance. Sharon, undeterred, deploys 40,000 troops and police to enforce the withdrawal, signaling his determination to reshape Israel's strategy. For Palestinians, the disengagement is a mixed prospect. Abbas welcomes it as a step toward ending occupation, calling it a historic opportunity. In a 2005 speech, yet many Palestinians view it with suspicion, fearing Israel will maintain control through border restrictions and airspace dominance. Hamas, now a major force, claims the withdrawal is a victory for its armed resistance, arguing that suicide bombings and rocket attacks forced Israel's hand. A 2005 poll by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research shows 60% of Palestinians support the disengagement, but 45% believe it strengthens Hamas, not the PA. The unilateral nature of the plan excluding Palestinian input undermines Abbas's authority, casting him as a bystander in a process reshaping Palestinian land. The evacuation begins on August 15, 2005, and is completed in 3 weeks. Israeli forces evacuate 8,000 settlers, some voluntarily, others forcibly. In Gush Kataf, families are dragged from homes, with 1,600 structures demolished, per the Israeli Ministry of Defense. The operation is emotional. Settlers weep, soldiers face moral dilemmas, and some youths resist chaining themselves to buildings. By September 12, 2005, all settlers and troops are gone. Ending 38 years of Israeli presence in Gaza, synagogues are left standing, but Palestinians later destroy them, reflecting pent-up anger. Israel retains control of Gaza's borders, airspace, and coastline, imposing a blockade that restricts goods and movement, a point of contention for Palestinians who see it as continued occupation. The disengagement is a gamble. Israel hopes it will reduce violence and international criticism, while Palestinians hope for self-governance. Yet it amplifies tensions, empowering Hamas and exposing the PA's fragility. The withdrawal, meant to signal a new era, instead sets the stage for deeper division, continued violence, a persistent shadow. Despite the disengagement, violence persists, undermining hopes for peace. In 2005, 15 suicide bombings kill 50 Israelis, per B'Tselem, a decline from 2004's 100 deaths, but still devastating. A July bombing in Netanya kills 5, while an October attack in Hadera claims 6. Hamas and Islamic Jihad claim most attacks, targeting markets and bus stops. Rocket fire from Gaza escalates, with 500 rockets launched in 2005, per the Israeli Ministry of Defense, compared to 400 in 2004. Though less deadly, the rockets terrorize Israeli communities like Sderot, where families sleep in bomb shelters. A 2005 poll by the Tommy Steinmetz Center shows 80% of Israelis fear for their safety, with public support for military retaliation growing. Israel responds with force. IDF operations kill 300 Palestinians in 2005, including 100 civilians, per B'Tselem. Raids in Gaza target rocket launch sites, while airstrikes hit militant leaders. A June 2005 strike in Gaza City kills 8, including 3 children, drawing uncondemnation. In the West Bank, the barrier, now 300 kilometers long, isolates 250,000 Palestinians, per UNRWA, exacerbating economic hardship. Home demolitions in Rafah displace 5,000 more, per Human Rights Watch. Checkpoints, numbering 1,500, restrict movement, with Palestinians waiting hours to reach jobs or hospitals. The violence perpetuates a cycle. A bombing prompts a raid fuels rockets, and the disengagement fails to break the pattern. The Palestinian Authority struggles to assert control. Abbas, elected in January 2005, negotiates a ceasefire in February at Sharm el-Sheikh, with Sharon agreeing to release 900 prisoners and ease checkpoints. The truce holds briefly, reducing bombings, but collapses by mid-2005 as Hamas resumes attacks. The PAS security forces, decimated by years of conflict, lack the capacity to disarm militants. Internal clashes erupt, with Fatah and Hamas gunmen fighting in Gaza, killing 15 in 2005, per Human Rights Watch. The disengagement, rather than empowering Abbas, highlights his weakness, as Hamas claims credit for liberating Gaza through resistance. Hamas's ascendancy. A new power rises. Gaza disengagement amplifies Hamas's influence, reshaping Palestinian politics. Hamas, blending militancy with social welfare, has grown steadily in Gaza, where 70% of the population lives below the poverty line, per UNRWA. Its schools, clinics, and charities fill gaps left by the PA's faltering governance. The withdrawal is a propaganda victory. Hamas portrays it as proof that armed struggle works, contrasting with Abbas' diplomacy. A 2005 poll by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research shows 40% of Palestinians support Hamas, up from 35% in 2004, while Fatah's support drops to 35%. Hamas's military wing escalates rocket attacks, framing them as resistance to Israel's blockade, which limits Gaza's access to goods and fuel. The PA's legitimacy erodes further. Corruption, a persistent issue, undermines Abbas's reforms. A 2005 Transparency International report notes ongoing mismanagement in PA institutions. With public frustration mounting, Hamas, seen as disciplined and uncorrupted, gains ground, particularly among youth. In Gaza, where unemployment hits 40%, Hamas recruits young men, some as young as 16, for its militias. Clashes with Fatah intensify, with 20 incidents in 2005 per Palestinian records, as both groups vie for control of Gaza's streets. Abbas attempts dialogue with Hamas, offering political inclusion, but Hamas demands power sharing and rejects disarmament, citing Israel's ongoing blockade. Israel's policies fuel Hamas's rise. The blockade, controlling Gaza's borders and imports, stifles the economy. Imports dropped 30% by late 2005, per the UN. Settlement expansion in the West Bank continues. 4,000 new units approved per piece now, undermining Abbas's credibility as a negotiator. Sharon's government, while withdrawing from Gaza, strengthens its grip on the West Bank, with the barrier now affecting 300 villages. These actions reinforce Hamas's narrative that negotiation is futile, bolstering its appeal as a resistance movement. Global response and fading hopes. The international community sees the disengagement as a potential breakthrough, but struggles to capitalize. The U.S., focused on Iraq and Afghanistan, praises Sharon's move as courageous. With Bush meeting Abbas in October 2005 to reaffirm the roadmap, yet U.S. support for Israel's blockade and settlements. Bush S. 2004 letter endorsing major settlement blocks remains a sore point, alienates Palestinians. The EU and UN welcomed the withdrawal, but criticized the blockade, with UNRWA reporting 80% of Gazans rely on aid by 2005. The quartet urges renewed talks. But the roadmap remains stalled, with no enforcement mechanism to address violations. Arab states, led by Egypt, mediate between Fatah and Hamas, hosting talks in Cairo, but fail to bridge the divide. The Arab League's 2002 peace initiative, offering normalized relations for a full Israeli withdrawal, is ignored by Israel. Global protests, 10,000 in Cairo, 5,000 in London, demand peace, but diplomacy falters. The UN General Assembly passes resolutions condemning the blockade and violence, but no binding action follows. The disengagement meant to spark progress instead exposes the conflict's intractability. The year 2005 marks a new era, but not one of peace. The Gaza disengagement, completed in September, ends Israel's physical presence but not its control, with the blockade fueling Palestinian resentment. Violence persists, 15 bombings, 300 Palestinian deaths, steepening trauma. Hamas's rise challenges Abbas's leadership, while the PAS weakness undermines hopes for governance. The human toll, 3,000 deaths since 2000, reflects a conflict spiraling further from resolution. In the next episode, the focus shifts to Hamas's 2006 election victory and its consequences.
From 2000 to 2005, The Second Intifada shattered Oslo's hopes. 4,000 Palestinians and 1,000 Israelis killed. A war dividing the West Bank and Gaza left free but fragile. Arafat's death and Israel's pullout marked a turning point, yet Hamas's rise cast new shadows. This was a saga of courage and tragedy. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, and follow the deep chapter. See you in Chapter 9, where Gaza's isolation and Hamas's power reshape the conflict.